Chapter 31. After all the hoopla of the big fire, it was a great letdown to have to think about such mundane things as water wings. Water wings are for babies, we had complained to Papa a million times. But now here we were, in the prime of our swimming careers, faced with the problem of how to get Helene Madison, the world champion swimmer, into a pair. She had called one day in response to Papa's invitation to go surfboarding. "I'll be out tomorrow and I'll bring my boyfriend." We crew members weren't at all enthused. "Helene's going to think our top is dumb. We probably won't be able to get the old whooping cough started. Our boat won't go fast enough for Helene." Fast was Helene's middle name. Not only was she the fastest female swimmer in the world, she may also have been the fastest female driver. She was noted for burning up the city streets in a bright red roadster that the proud city fathers had presented to her in thanks for all the publicity she was bringing to Seattle. "Blackie will think that our surfboard is dumb." Papa ignored us and told Helene, "We'll have the boat at the bathing beach, ready to go." On that morning, however, Papa was called to the office unexpectedly, so he reluctantly turned the job over to us, giving us a long list of instructions. Helene and Blackie arrived at Seward in her red roadster with a screech of brakes and a cloud of dust. Immediately, everyone on the beach gathered around to get a glimpse of the world champion, a bigger draw in Seattle than any movie star. She had won every AAU National Freestyle Championship in 1930 and 1931, set a number of world records, and been named the Female Athlete of the Year by the Associated Press. Now she was in training for the Olympic Games, which were to be held in Los Angeles in 1932. While Helene waved and chatted, Blackie jumped into the boat, gave old whooping cough a crank, and much to our amazement, it responded. As soon as the crowd released Helene, we were off. I was already having a nervous breakdown. Blackie was not supposed to be driving, Floor was. It was obvious that Blackie already had old whooping cough in full throttle, and Dora and I were sitting at attention, ready to grab the top if the screws started popping. "It would go faster if you didn't have this top," he said, yanking on a loose piece of tape which was flapping furiously. We knew. "I kind of like it," Helene laughed. "It reminds me of a 4-poster bed." When Blackie cut the motor and put the surfboard over the side, he remarked, "Guess your dad made that, huh? A streamlined surfboard wouldn't be such a pull on the boat." That was something else we already knew. Helene took off her sweatshirt and began to put on her cap. We were now at the moment we had been dreading. I looked to Floor, who was acting terribly busy assisting Blackie. She gave me the adult authority look and handed the responsibility over to me. I fumbled sheepishly under the front seat and pulled out the water wings. My voice was suddenly thin. "Helene, Papa has a rule." As soon as I said it, I knew I shouldn't be bothering Helene with rules. At the swimming pool, she was a stickler for rules, but outside it was a different matter. Every week or so, a story appeared in the paper about some policeman chasing after her little red car, trying to catch up so he could tell Seattle's sweetheart about rules. Helene took one look and squealed, "Hey, look, Blackie, we've got you a pair of water wings so you won't get sunky-wunky." Blackie playfully invited her. "I'd like to know who's going to put 'em on me." "I kinda think I will," said Helene. She grabbed the water wings and started for him. The boat rocked dangerously, and we small potatoes shifted about, trying to keep it from swamping. If only we had explained the rule about horseplay. Finally, Blackie got a hammer hold on Helene. "Now I think I'll put the water wings on this little girl." "Over my dead body," laughed Helene. We watched helplessly until Blackie was finally able to throw Helene into the water. It was obvious she wasn't wearing water wings. She swam back to the surfboard, Blackie got the motor running, and we were off. He circled the beach so spectators could watch the Queen of the Waters, as sports writers had named her. Beautiful in a swimsuit, sleek, streamlined, and almost 6 feet tall. Certainly not a little girl, as Blackie had said. Dor was sitting in the seat beside me. "Franny, you should have insisted that she wear the water wings. If she falls and hits her head and can't swim in the Olympics, it will be all your fault." How well I knew. My head was filled with headlines. World champion swimmer drowns, not wearing water wings. Frances Bigham indicted for murder. "Papa's probably standing on shore watching right now," Dor said. By the time Helene was finished and had climbed over the side of the boat, I was in a pool of sweat. Blackie was next. He dove off and swam back to the surfboard. Floor had the motor at full throttle in no time. We watched Blackie as he swerved back and forth, skipping over the waves. We weren't worried about him. He could take care of himself. Even if he did drown, he had no world records to be concerned about. We all turned our attention to Helene, watching her apply cocoa butter to her legs while stretching out on the mattress. She said, "Your boat is a nice place for an afternoon nap. Did you ever consider sleeping in it overnight?" As a matter of fact, we 3 little Bighams had long discussed an overnight cruise, but Mama said that she had had all the boat sleeping she cared for, referring, we supposed, to the naps she took whenever we went out. Dor explained, "When we take our overnight trip, I have the bony dibs to sleep under the front deck. Flor and Fran have to sleep on the seats, and Mama and Papa will sleep on the mattress." Helene laughed at Dor, her little protege. She enjoyed the comparisons coaches and the press made between the two of them, calling Dor the next Helene Madison. "Well, that's how it will be then. A bony dibs is absolutely binding." Suddenly Helene straightened up. "Where's Blackie?" He was nowhere in sight. Neither was the surfboard. The only thing visible was the taut rope still tied to the transom. Flor jumped back and cut the motor. Helene dove over the side. In a few strokes she disappeared under the water. Finally the surface opened up, and Helene, Blackie, and the board shot up. She pulled him back to the boat, and together we pulled them over the side. Helene was practically hysterical, laughing. "What were you doing anyway?" "Well, I fell and caught my wrist in the rope, and the darn thing took a nosedive." The only positive of the whole trip was that Papa didn't make it back in time to witness the shenanigans. However, he heard about it later. Helene, almost as good at stories as at swimming, had a great time telling about the trip around the club, adding spectacular details. Soon, there were news accounts of how the world champion had rescued her friend from drowning. Blackie was good-humored about it, but Papa was puzzled. He said to Mama, "You wouldn't think he'd sink with water wings on." "It was because," I started to say, but Flor put her hand over my mouth. The biggest miracle of the whole trip was how well old Whooping Cough had responded to Blackie's handling. For us, it could never be relied on. Just before the guarantee expired, Papa succumbed to Mama's complaints and took it back to the dealer. "They'll tell me it's in top shape. Any fool could run it," he muttered. When he came home, Mama said, "What did they say?" "They said it's in top shape. Any fool could run it." We all knew better, so did Papa. He remained Captain Conservative, staying out of the paths of pending storms and within rowing distance of home. That is, until the day of the Elks Club annual picnic. It was a trip that we later spoke of disparagingly as the Fortuna Overnight Cruise. Ironically, the trip was not intended to be a cruise at all. Papa's plans had been to drive the car to Fortuna Park, the popular ferry landing on the east side of Mercer Island, where we girls were to swim in an exhibition with Helene before a number of dignitaries, the owner of Fortuna Park, the mayor of Seattle, the governor of Washington. These plans were altered, however, on the morning of the big picnic, when a car full of Papa's friends drove up. Laura and Varen, their son, who we called Brat, for reasons that will be understood presently, and 2 friends, one named Will and his buddy, who Papa called Want. When they heard our plans, they decided to go too. All of Papa's highfalutin friends liked to go to Fortuna, the gin capital of the world, as some called it. They had climbed back into their car and were ready to take off when Laura came up with an idea. "Hey, Roy, why don't we go in your boat?" "Sure, it would be a lot shorter," Will said. "We could cut across the lake." Want was pondering his response, but Papa wasn't. "The boat would be overloaded, and it's a long way in an overloaded boat." "But it's a beautiful day. No wind on the water," said Will. "The wind can spring up on Lake Washington at any time," Mama said. Laura was persistent. "We've never even been in your boat, Roysy Woysy, and you keep promising." Mama was absolutely opposed. I was opposed too. I knew what happened to Papa when he was with these friends. A recklessness came over him. Irresponsible, Mama called it. I wanted to say to Papa, "Please don't let's go with these people." But Papa, usually very strong in his convictions, caved in. When we were loaded and pushing off, I understood Mama's objections. With all the picnic gear and 10 people, the water was within a few inches of the gunnels. Papa had become serious again. "Everybody is going to have to sit still. No jumping around." He emphasized this because Brat Russell was certainly inclined towards jumping around. "Well, cheer up, Roysy Woysy. This is a picnic." All went well on the way over. Everyone was in high spirits, and old Whooping Cough performed magnificently. Papa beamed. "It's the greatest motor ever made. I had a few problems to begin with, but now I've got it licked." I was relieved to learn that. The only problem was Brat Russell, who kept jumping around. Papa mumbled, "Don't leave me alone with that kid. I'll kill him." When we pulled into the crowded dock alongside the big white ferry, it was agreed that we would start home early, because we didn't have running lights. In fact, as we found out later, our sole form of illumination was the tiny flashlight in Mama's purse. As soon as Laura set foot ashore, she headed for the dance hall. "I just have to dance. Come on, Roisey Woisey." That left Mama Wama in charge of the picnic table. She made us hot dogs, but Brat wouldn't eat his because it had mustard on it. "You know I don't like mustard on my hot dogs." After Mama carefully scraped it off, he dropped it in the sand and demanded another. I figured it was a good thing. Roisey Woisey was dancing. The rest of the day went well, with the swimming exhibition being the highlight. Everyone told us what great swimmers we were. We knew that. At supper time, Mama was becoming uneasy, pointing out that there were clouds in the sky and the wind was coming up. Everyone else was happy as a clam, proof that Fortuna was indeed the gin capital of the world. Want was extolling the pleasures of boating. "Have you ever slept overnight in your boat?" "Wouldn't be bad," Will said. "With that nice mattress." Papa spoke hesitantly. "Well, Tenny and I slept in it, one night." We girls, who were helping Mama clean up the picnic plates, perked up our ears. "When?" "Well," Papa started acting reckless. I guess it's time the girls heard the whole story. The night that I sold the Studebaker, the kids decided to sleep in it, the car, that is. After everyone was bedded down, Tenny and I began to hear noises. I grabbed my cane and Tenny grabbed her scissors and we crept down the stairs and across the lawn to the car. Nothing seemed amiss. The kids were asleep, blankets over their heads. Tenny insisted we make them come inside. Mama interjected. But then he came up with the idea that we'd sleep in the boat, which was on the trailer parked behind the car. Flora looked at me in surprise. Papa talked on. We got our bedding, and I boosted Tenny over the side. While I steadied the boat, darn boat rocks a lot on the trailer, she made up the bed. All of this was in the dark, of course, except for momentary flickers from Tenny's flashlight. When I started up over the side, the darn thing gave a lurch, and I fell in head first. Then, damn it, I got my nightshirt caught on an oarlock. Mama forced a smile and confirmed the story thus far. "But what happened after that? I can't swear to." Papa, who had never had any problem with swearing, said, "Well, I can. To get unhitched, I had to take the darn nightshirt off. But before I could get purified, so to speak, here comes this woman rushing up the sidewalk. I could see her when she passed under the streetlight, and I could tell that she was pretty scared to be out alone at night. My first thought was to dive into the bottom of the boat, but..." Flora and Dor looked at me in disbelief. But I could imagine what that would entail. The boat would rock, Tenny would scream, the kids would wake up, they would scream, and the woman would go screaming up the hill, making the dogs howl and waking up all the neighbors. So I did what I thought was the most expedient. I froze right where I was. Unfortunately, that's when Tenny turned on the flashlight. No one could top that story, of course, so we all headed for the boat. The wind had picked up, just as Mama had predicted. Papa was stationed at Old Whooping Cough, but before he could start the motor, it was necessary to thread our way through the knot of other boats. Will and Want were at the oars, and it was obvious that they hadn't taken Papa's short course in rowing. Suddenly there was a loud blast, which practically lifted us into the air. The ferry was beginning to churn against the water. It was so close by that, as Will said later, I could have spit against the wind and hit a porthole. If we had been given the right to vote, I'm sure we would have voted to pull back to shore and yield to the great white monster. Papa, now wearing his rain hat, was being very undemocratic. He had set his course, and he intended to continue. He confidently turned the screw, pulled the lever, and gave a crank. Nothing happened. He repeated the process, again, nothing. After a dozen tries, he went to option number 2. He began banging on it. That didn't do any good either. The ferry was giving a series of deafening blasts, and suddenly everyone on board was hanging over the side, yelling, "Get that tub out of the way, we're leaving!" I was purple. I sank down as far as I could. The water outside the gunnels was only about an inch from my ears. My imagination took over. "Ferry captain calling first mate. Everything ready?" "Everything ready, sir?" "We must make a good impression. Important people aboard. Owner of Fortuna Park, Helene Madison, Mayor of Seattle, Governor of the state. We shall make a good impression, sir. 10, 9, 8, blowhorn. Horn blown, sir. Good heavens, what is everyone yelling about?" "Small boat in our path, sir. Looks like a four-poster bed. Order boat or bed or whatever to move immediately. Sir, the boat's motor is dead. The dumb egg is trying to crank. Order the dumb egg to man oars. Oars being manned, sir. 2 men rowing in circles, sir. Order the 2 men to not row in circles. Order given. Order not being followed. Give another blast on the horn. Horn blasted, sir. Keep blasting. Sir, 2 young girls, Helene Madison's friends, are now at oars. Order Helene to get her friends out of the way. Sir, Helene Madison said she never saw the 2 girls in her life, especially the chubby one. She also never saw that dumb boat with the green and white striped top. Stand by. The owner reports we are fired. In that case, shall we shut down the engines? Hell no. Full steam ahead. That's when the huge, white object, looming higher than the Smith Tower, streaked past, blasting its horn all the way. I could see the headlines. Ferry hits small boat. All aboard drowned. 3 Bigham girls identified by hideous black bloomers. Helene Madison says, not my friends. The rest of the trip was anticlimactic. The motor refused to run. The wind increased. The rain poured down. We didn't dare take the shortcut across the lake. We had to follow the shoreline. Miles and miles of shoreline. Will and Want, who had started out singing Show Me the Way to Go Home, finally realized that home might be a few light years away, so they stopped singing and became surly. Most of the time I was in such a stupor that I could hear Amy Semple McPherson singing, Shall We Gather at the River? Before I could gather, I was forced back to consciousness by the words, It's your turn to row. We all took turns rowing, except Brat Russell, the only dry one in the boat, who kept complaining about the sleeping accommodations and how little he liked mustard on his hot dogs. Everyone was ready to kill. Papa even knew how he would do it. I'm going to stuff mustard down his throat. Throughout the night, Papa kept banging on old Whooping Cough. At the slightest sound from across the water, Mama bravely held up her little flashlight. About a block from our docking place, old Whooping Cough hacked a couple of times and began to run. Papa barely had time to yell, Pull in the oars! That's when Mama's flashlight gave out. No one saw any humor in that, until Papa said later, You'd better take your flashlight back to the store where you bought it before the guarantee runs out.